Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Michael Matt down in the catacombs with a bit of sad news tonight. The passing of Anthony S. Fraser, the editor of Apropos magazine from Scotland. The news of his passing reached us this week and kind of hit us like a punch to the chest, quite honestly. He was not an old man. He was an old and faithful, loyal and friend and ally. And it's just really, really shocking that he has passed. And we wanted to start tonight's program by acknowledging his passing and by sending out our promises of prayers to his family, not only for the repose of Anthony Fraser's soul, but also for the family who's going through an unexpected time of grief now in their lives. Now, Anthony Fraser is the son of Hamish Fraser, and not wishing in any way to capitalize on this tragic news, I think we can hold up both Hamish Fraser and Anthony Fraser as examples of really, really outstanding tradition-minded Catholics who devoted their lives to defending the church, defending the social kingship of Christ, the social teaching of the church, and not just the liturgy. Now Hamish Fraser, Anthony's father, was a former communist who converted midlife to Catholicism, recognized that something terrible was happening to the Catholic Church, and becomes this incredible defender of the Catholic Church, the traditions of the Catholic Church. And his son follows suit with his magazine Apropos. And I wanted to instead of just eulogizing Anthony, I wanted to hold him up as an exemplar of what we mean by traditional Catholic, because there's so much misunderstanding about what it is to be a traditionalist in the world right now, that at any opportunity that comes to us for us to clarify what it means to be a traditionalist, I think we need to use this opportunity. I know my friend Tony Fraser would appreciate the fact that we recognized in him an exemplar traditionalist. So what does it mean? You know, the idea now is that what we're all about is simply the traditional Latin Mass, that we're almost liturgical snobs, and that we really are into Latin, and the whole thing for us is just getting the Mass that we prefer, and that's what makes us traditionalists. But Tony Fraser's life and his father's life and their career, their work, is just the opposite of that. They use the Mass as a sort of a rallying point. What they were trying to do is say, look what's happening to, now we're talking back in the 70s, 60s, late 60s and 70s, and even the early 80s, of course. But what they were saying is, look what's happening to the Mass, and we can learn a great deal about what's happening to the church and to society by the efforts that are being made to undermine the Roman Rite. And by using that as sort of a touchstone or a rallying point, they were able to expand their polemic and their apostolates to the larger fight, which was to defend the moral authority of the Catholic Church, the moral integrity of the Catholic Church as the only means of salvation, as the only true moral voice in society. And this is very important. And both of these men led with the kingship of Christ. Now the problem is, our friends the Neo-Catholics look at the kingship of Christ as sort of a pious thing for old ladies. You know what I mean, Rob? It's like, they equate it with a devotion, right? And like maybe the devotion to a favorite saint or something. They don't understand that what the kingship of Christ is actually a doctrine of the church. And the ruling arm of the kingship of Christ is the social teaching of the church. Now, the social teaching of the church has everything to do with the church's impact on society, whether it be on the family, on marriage, on the issues of life, abortion, contraception, everything that you can think of in terms of the social living of our lives in our society is affected directly by the social teaching of the Catholic Church. And Christ the King exercises his authority through this ruling arm of the church called the social teaching. So the true traditional Catholic is a champion of the social teaching of the church, is a champion of the kingship of Christ for that reason. And I think it's very important for us to not fall for this idea that all it is to be a traditionalist is to just prefer Latin Masses. That's all it is. That's not what it is. The men who founded the traditional Catholic movement took a principled stand against those who were trying to undermine the Catholic Church because they knew that the church would preserve order in the state. The church was the only authority that could preserve social order. So what do we have now? We're all looking on in horror at a place called Ferguson, Missouri right now. Now this is flyover land. This isn't LA, this isn't New York, this is Missouri, in which the police are losing control of the situation in Ferguson over the shooting of this young man, this unfortunate shooting. Rob, I'm not going to sit here and blame the young man who was shot, who obviously was robbing stores and wandering. He's a mess. He's a mess. This guy is a mess. I'm not going to blame the police, some of whom, for all I knew, maybe did draw a little sooner than they have to. The bigger issue that we should all be thinking about is the fact that in society now, even in white bread middle America, there is no moral authority anymore. These young guys that are growing up in Ferguson, in these neighborhoods, that most of them don't have fathers, they're from broken homes, they're from the whole shattered edifice of what's left since Christendom has fallen. And this is what traditional Catholicism has been all about, to try to restore some sort of authority that could prevent what's happening in Ferguson, for example, from taking place. And what we have now is chaos, which is precisely what the great Hilaire Belloc predicted. If you don't have Christ, you will have chaos, and now we have chaos. And it's not just Ferguson. It's not just Ferguson, where these young guys are the victims of liberal education. They've gone through public schools. They've never seen their fathers. They've got maniac hate mongers like Al Sharpton going down there to just continue to spread the hate, not to fix anything, but to capitalize on the hate and on the social unrest for their own ends. And it's just not Ferguson. Like I say, you have Chicago. I got some interesting statistics about what happened in the Windy City. Did you follow this, Rob, over the 4th of July?
No, I missed that.
Over the 4th of July. It's just unbelievable. No one's talking about this, but over the 4th of July weekend in Chicago, 82 people were shot in an 84-hour window time. 82 folks were shot. It's just about one shooting per hour. This is complete chaos. This is according to the Chicago Tribune. 14 were dead by Monday morning after the fun Chicago 4th of July weekend, including 2 boys aged 14 and 16 who were killed by police in separate incidents when they refused to drop their guns. 14 and 12-year-old kids, 16-year-old kids. This isn't their fault, and it's not the police fault. So whose fault is it? This chaos that we see now all over the world, from the Mideast, and now it's coming home to roost in our own country. The fault is that we don't have anyone who can speak morally. We threw God out of the public schools. We have mothers aborting their own children now by the millions, and that's fine, protected under law. Where are these young men supposed to find the moral fiber to live the moral lives that we wish they would? You see, what's missing is the Catholic people say, well, what about Al Capone? He was shooting up Chicago back in the 30s and blah, blah, blah. No, it's a different situation. Al Capone and the gangsters had a purpose for what they were doing. They were bad guys, no question about it. But society rejected them. And the reason we still have movies and books about Al Capone is because society, generally speaking, was moral. Now you have millions of little Al Capones out there just shooting each other up right and left every day, and no one can do anything about it, including the police. Blaming the police isn't going to do anything. Yeah, they're arming up. They're bringing tanks in. I would too. I would too if I were the police, to try to do something to maintain order and to prevent the social unrest that's now tearing our country in half. That's the future. That's what we're seeing. Not only the future, that's what's happening right now. And you see what's happening in the Middle East. We just got an email tonight from a guy. His name is Sean Malone, who leads the Crisis Relief International. And he sends out this panicked email in which he writes, "We lost the city of Karakosh. It fell to ISIS, and they are beheading children systematically. This is the city we have been smuggling food into. ISIS has pushed back the Kurdish forces and is within 10 minutes, of where our CRI team is working. Thousands more fled into the other city of Erbil last night. The UN evacuated its staff from this city. Our team is unmoved and will stay, but we need your prayers," end quote. Now this is just, everyone is reading things like this constantly. We're seeing journalists being beheaded. We're seeing all sorts of chaotic things happening. But it's not in faraway places. It's happening everywhere across the whole world since the Catholic Church has ceased to be a moral authority. People say, well, that's myopic. There are all sorts of contributing factors. Are there? Are there really? It's been really, if you think about this type of unrest, is a relatively new phenomenon. We have since only the early 70s, where you have these school shootings and neighborhood shootings and drive-by shootings for no purpose whatsoever. It is the very chaos that was predicted by great Catholic, great traditionalists, if and when Christ is thrown out of society. That's where we are. So let me read a bit of a lengthy quote from Hilaire Belloc's book, The Crusades, The World's Defense, in which he predicts this very thing in a time when Islam did not seem to be a threat, but he knew that it would be if Christianity, if Catholicism ceased to be a mitigating factor, which is what's now happened. So Belloc writes, quote, "The story must not be neglected by any modern who may think in error that the East has finally fallen before the West, that Islam is now enslaved to our political and economic power at any rate, if not to our philosophy. It is not so. Islam essentially survives, and Islam would not have survived had the crusade made good its hold upon the essential point of Damascus. Islam survives. Its religion is intact. Therefore, its material strength may return. Our religion, on the other hand, is in peril. And who can be confident in the continued skill, let alone the continued obedience, of those who make and work our machines? There is with a complete chaos in religious doctrine. We worship ourselves, we worship the nation, or we worship, some few of us, a particular economic arrangement believed to be the satisfaction of social justice. Islam has not suffered this spiritual decline, and in the contrast between our religious chaos and Islam's religious certitudes still strong throughout the Mohammedan world lies our own peril. Now, this was written almost 100 years ago by Hilaire Belloc. What's important for us to understand is that there is only one solution to this, that what we're seeing in Ferguson, what we're seeing in Chicago, and all of our major cities is only going to get worse, but that there is an infrastructure in place even today that can stop this. What's needed is a moral voice again, moral authority. And our neo-Catholic friends need to realize that they have to step up to the plate. Their answer to this mayhem, spiritual, cultural, political mayhem, social mayhem, is to basically morph into Protestants. They talk about mission and evangelization and covenants and all of these things that they imagine are going to have some impact, but they are not going to have an impact. And that's the thing with traditional Catholicism. We need the neo-Catholic numbers. We need everyone to come together and say the fort has been betrayed. Catholicism has fallen on its face because it has replaced true evangelization, the true missionary spirit, with dialogue, with ecumenism, which has basically denuded us, which has basically stripped our Catholic identity and forced our Catholic Church, and the human element at least, into something that has no political impact on anyone. There's no one in Ferguson, there's no one in Chicago, there's no one in LA, in Iraq, or anywhere else who is listening to the Catholic Church anymore. And that's why we have the chaos that we have, because the Catholic Church is the voice of Jesus Christ. You throw Christ out, you have chaos. And that is what we have. We have chaos. Christ or chaos, tradition or chaos, Catholic restoration or chaos. That is the options, those are the only two options that we have. And so it's so important to realize that those who want to identify with traditional Catholicism, it's about the restoration of the social teaching of the Church. It's about the restoration of the moral authority of the Church, not just the Latin Mass. That's not it. That's central and that's important, but it's much, much more than that. And until we realize that, society is going to continue, as it were, without any sort of moral governing authority, and all we can expect is chaos.